Good morning. I'll call the meeting to order there. I'd like to welcome everybody who is present today in what I hope will be a productive and positive meeting. I am Councillor Jo Lawson, lead member of the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being webcast. Before we commence the meeting, I would request that those of you with mobile phones turn them at least to silence, if not off, to minimise disruptions of the proceedings. For those of you who are not familiar with the arrangements, can I first introduce you to the various parties that will be involved in the process? The panel, which is sat in the centre here, consists of Councillor Matthew McLaughlin, Councillor Timothy Bamford, Councillor Hannah McKercher, and we have our co-optee Gary Kitchen here today. Beside me is Jodie Harris and Lee Webb, who are officers from the government's team, and they will be supporting the panel during the meeting. And to my left, we have the signatories for the call-in, and they are here to provide evidence and answer questions on those areas of the call-in that the panel will be focusing on. And to my right, we have Councillor Yusra Hussain, who is the Cabinet Member with responsibility for culture and greener Kirklees, who is here to answer the panel's questions and provide evidence as the decision maker. The Cabinet Member is supported by a number of officers who also sat on the right-hand side. We also have in attendance Councillor Graham Turner, who is the Cabinet Member with responsibility for finance and regeneration. The aim of today is for the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel to consider very carefully issues raised by the notice of the call-in by listening to the views and supporting evidence from the signatories to the call-in, the council decision makers, councillors of the authority and any members of the public. In terms of arrangements for the meeting, we will be following a strict timetable which has been handed out to everybody. We have structured the meeting to try to allow sufficient time and opportunity for the panel to hear the breadth of relevant evidence on issues raised in the call-in. The panel members will hear all perspectives to assist them in coming to a balanced view and inform their conclusions. I would like to remind everybody that we are looking to conduct a fair and responsible review, and wherever possible, I would like people to adhere to the time allocated to address the scrutiny panel. I realise that people feel very passionate about this issue, but would like to ask that everybody behaves in a respectful way so that the panel can hear from all parties and within the timescales allocated. If you are speaking, please do not repeat points which have already been made by other speakers. Can I also remind you that we are here to specifically review two areas raised in the notice of call-in. You will find this information in the paperwork in front of you. The panel will focus on clarity and options. People addressing the panel need to focus on these areas, please. I would also wish to stress to all of you present here today that the scrutiny panel does not have the power to overturn the Cabinet decision. However, after taking account of all the evidence that has been presented today, the panel may recommend that the Cabinet consider making amendments to the decision. It will be up to the Cabinet to decide whether it wishes to accept the scrutiny panel's recommendations. Finally, I want to emphasise that scrutiny is here today to provide an independent review of the decision. Whatever outcome the panel reaches today, I wish to assure everybody that the members of this panel have not prejudged their conclusion and will reach a decision based solely on the balance of the facts that have been presented. If you'll just excuse me, I just need a little drink. is, do we have any apologies from panel members?
No apologies received, thank you.
Oh.
Apologies were received from Will Simpson this morning, Councillor Simpson.
And declarations of any interest. Have any of the members of the panel got any interest that they need to declare? No. And admission of the public is, most of this agenda will take place in public. This would only change if any of the information that was being given to the panel was deemed to be commercially sensitive, and we would then go into private session. So if I can ask the lead signatory, Councillor Mark Thompson, to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as succinct as possible and keep to the two items on the agenda, the first being clarity. I was looking through the Constitution yesterday evening and trying to put into context what clarity meant as far as Kirklees and decision making was concerned. The first that struck me was in 13.2 of the Constitution, item F. It states clarity, be clear in our aims and what the Council want to achieve. It also then goes on in item H with lawfulness and financial propriety. Lawfully and in the interests of the community we serve. Also in the same section, there will be appropriate consultation and professional advice obtained by officers. And one other thought was pertinent to today and clarity, which was relevant considerations, due regard to all relevant considerations. And I think the most relevant of all the clauses within the Constitution is G, which was part of the call-in today, which is clarity of aims and desired outcomes, no financial information, etc. So this is the part that I want to delve into a little bit deeper, reference to the clarity and the finances. So what I'd like to ask first of all is, in the considerations, have we taken the time to look at the finances behind the parking fees in particular areas of the borough? Have we looked at the net positive and what sort of timeframes we'll be looking at for this new addition as far as parking fees? How long will it take for us to be net positive? Will it be worth all the negatives that could be an even greater effect rather than just the small amount of cash that could be raised? So then I looked into some of the parking regulations and advice that's out there as far as councils are concerned. And I'd like to refer to a document called Think Parking, which was commissioned by the RAC and other main industries around parking, cars, transport. One of their statements, or the second paragraph in the Parking on High Street Guidance of Parking Provision for Towns and City Centres, it says, consequently, car parking charges cannot be viewed one-dimensionally as a single revenue source for local authorities. If such charges damage the viability of a town centre, it will have a knock-on effect on the resources available to the authority. Car parking charges must be viewed more holistically as part of an accessibility strategy for town centres, which takes into account the need to promote its businesses. It goes on to say that often the net negative of placing parking fees that haven't existed in a particular town can have the net negative as a borough and collecting business rates because of business closing or lack of turnover therein. So I'd like to look at a consideration that all towns and villages, are we treating them the same? Because of the lack of clarity, we don't know. Have we looked at each town, each village and its own merits to find out what damage parking fees could and will have a negative effect? And could it have a negative effect, therefore, in the greater scheme of things as far as the borough's finances? And then I remember us listening to a statement where there was no evidence or little evidence to show that there would be an effect on towns and villages by adding parking fees. Delving around in the archives, Leeds University did quite a lengthy project on parking for boroughs, and one of the towns that was used as a template was Marsden. And this is the crux of the report. It states, much political and public resistance to increasing parking charges stems from the fear that there will be damage to retail and business investment. This fear can especially be acute in towns and cities perceiving that they have economies which are relatively weak compared to neighbours, Marsden being the reference. However, there is no evidence to support these concerns, except in the case of a city or a town competing with out-of-town shopping centres offering free parking. Not that I like to use my hometown of Birstall as one, but parking fees that would be added to 4 car parks in Birstall less than a mile away, there are hundreds of free parking at the retail park. So obviously from that report, it would have an adverse effect. And then going back to clarity, the document that we were offered as far as the budget variances, growth and regen Q2 23-24 forecast is that parking as a subheader would be a plus 300,000 change, and the reason for variance is the shortfall in income. Again, as far as clarity is concerned, I see no clarity. And document 4, as we've all seen, is just a red background with plus 300,000 and a statement that says shortfall in income. So again, I would argue that clarity isn't in this document, isn't in the will of the Cabinet to add parking charges. And lastly, on clarity, I'd like to mention that there's been no financial information on the cost to council to implement additional fees, cost to council to add the machines in the particular towns and car parks that have been mentioned, the app cost as far as commission's concerned, the manpower cost to enforce, to maintain the equipment, the signs and painting of bays that needs to be upgraded and added, timeframes to be cash positive, and the cost of implementation for the business rate loss that could well be. So that's my points on clarity. The next, as far as options are concerned, so the Constitution 3.2 section I, the ability to explain the options considered and the reasons for decisions. So no notes of exceptions, no options built in for the word-by-word differences and the use by residents. It looks like that the residents are being done to rather than considered. Example would be, in our ward, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 car parks, which one of them is sited next to a supermarket, which we allow the supermarket to use the car park. We're actually considering putting parking fees on all 4 car parks when there are several hundred free car parking spaces less than 3/4 of a mile away at Junction 27 Retail Park. So, are we going to give the residents of a village or a town like this no consideration and no options? So, what are the options that are open to us? Have the residents had any options given to them? What options were given, and why aren't they listed if there has been consideration and options? And where are the options for everybody to consider today? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gregg, as one of the signatories, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't actually got a copy of the agenda in front of me, so apologies if I deviate slightly. There were just a couple of questions I had related to following on from what we're here for today, which is about lack of financial consideration in the original report. I don't know whether it's possible to ask those now or at a later stage, but it was just to really highlight two points.
Just in terms of process, Councillor Gregg, as a signatory, it's not really for you to ask questions of the panel. If you want to make a statement based on the notice of calling that you submitted, and that may raise questions that the panel may want to put when we get a bit later. But really at this point, it's kind of really for you to sort of outline the reasons for the calling and why you put it forward.
That's fine, I can do that, thank you. The reason I've come here today is just to reiterate what residents have been speaking to me about on the doorstep with regards to the parking charge proposals, increase for parking charges in existing free car parks across the borough, and also with regards to price increases as well. Residents deserve to know and they deserve transparency with regards to what this decision is being made for. Is it being made for generating extra revenue, or is it being made for modal shift has been alluded to? So I think there needs to be clarity with regards to that. In terms of the revenue that is going to be generated, how is that revenue going to be utilised? These are questions that residents are asking me. I don't have the answers. Obviously, we would love them in the report and a bit more meat on the bone with that. And finally, just what measures have been taken with regards to the car parking charges and increases on businesses, particularly in small towns. Those were the points that people have been putting to me. I support their views on that, and I've not been able to give them solid information because of the lack of detail in the report. Thank you.
I'd like to first of all thank Councillor Thompson and Councillor Gregg for outlining why they actually brought the call in there. At this stage in the proceedings, the panel can ask questions of them. Is there anybody who wants to ask any questions? Okay, since there are no questions, I will move on next to any other elected members that wish to actually speak. We do have a list, and sorry, first speaker is Councillor Monroe. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to speak very briefly, actually. So 14 years have lapsed since parking charges were increased. That was in 2009. 9 months have lapsed since a consultation was announced in the budget papers in March this year. I just want to raise this as an issue. The level 1 integrated impact assessment did not assess the financial implications for businesses and residents and all key stakeholders in our village centres where parking charges are to be introduced. In Almonbury, the area I represent, we lost resident parking places a couple of years ago. This has resulted in residents being forced, they have nowhere else to park, they are forced to park in the council car park, which is currently free. And these people were not considered in the impact assessment. So I'm seeking clarification on why that is, why that assessment did not assess the implications for people where parking places have been lost in our village centres. I do not believe it simply suffices to state compliance is impractical because an immediate revision of the council's car parking tariffs is required when a consultation could have been held in the last 9 months. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Councillor Smage.
Thank you. I'm speaking in my role as Chair of Scrutiny and therefore on process in relation to the notice of concern that I issued. On reading the report when originally published, I had a number of concerns about what was not in the report and took this decision to issue a notice of concern. A notice is a formal procedure where Scrutiny has the opportunity to express concerns before a decision is taken. After discussions with officers and the notice being issued, there were some amendments to the original published report, such as the addition of a link to the impact assessment. However, many of the points raised were not addressed prior to the Cabinet meeting. The Cabinet have several options open to them after a notice of concern. They can defer the item for further consideration, continue with the item on the agenda, or they may look to address the concerns prior to the meeting. In this case, the item was decided at the meeting, but recommendations that were in the report were altered at the meeting for decision. The procedure is that the notice can then be withdrawn if all the concerns have been addressed. However, I did not feel that all of my concerns had been addressed and therefore notified officers of the following. There was a comment on consultation, but that's out of the scope of this calling, so I won't go into that. There is a clear information, there is still no financial implications and no assessment whether income levels can be achieved. There is no economic impact assessment. Whilst I recognise that the Cabinet member said there would be an audit, if no assessment is carried out before the recommendations are enacted, then there is no baseline for any forthcoming audit. In relation to finance, other reports on the same agenda where there would be financial implications had that information in the reports. I would not have expected a report where there was an expectation of income levels and where there would be expenditure in order to introduce the schemes to be silent on financial implications. In fact, because this was not just about increasing charges but introducing into new areas, there surely would be a reasonable expectation that there would be financial information on those income levels and costs of implementation and enforcement, as well as information as to why current income levels had dropped. I looked to see if I could find any reports from any other authority on this subject, and of the two that I looked at, they both had financial information in them. One covered the cost of statutory consultation, when I can say the word, gave current income levels from car parking and what options had been considered. Another had expected income levels from changes to charges and gave a basis for the assumptions made. But the report before our Cabinet did not cover any of this, hence my continued concerns. The Cabinet member indicated at the meeting that financial modelling had been undertaken, but why was that modelling not in the report for decision? Parking income and expenditure is, after all, public information. My concerns still remain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the panel to either of the councillors that have actually spoken? We'll move on then to the next part of the agenda, where Councillor Hussain will go through with us how she came to the decision that she did have.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to cover a bit of the background and context. Hopefully that should cover some of the points. If not, I will go through the points that the panel members and observers have raised. So Kirklees Council operates and manages both on-street and off-street car parks across the borough not unlike the surrounding local authorities. So at present, Kirklees Council only charge for off-street parking in 3 centres, namely Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Holmfirth. The Kirklees Council's financial position is well reported, and as a result of all aspects of the Council's finances are under review, including parking income, as reported in the medium-term financial strategy. Parking tariffs across the borough have been static for over 14 years. The ability for this council to continue to subsidise tariffs against inflationary increases is no longer sustainable, given the financial challenges we face. In addition, over 50 off-street car parks remain free of charge, which is unprecedented in comparison. Work began in September to scope out the uplift in tariffs with further discussion in October to understand the potential, which include a retrospective uplift of existing tariffs in line with inflation and the proposal to charge on car parks that have historically been free of charge. This provided an estimated potential income of 2.6 million. Our mid-year financial review identified that we had more to do to close the council's financial gap. The discussions regarding parking income uplift had been progressing through the normal flight paths. It was therefore agreed that a report would be produced for the Cabinet meeting on 14th of November. That was to seek approval to undertake both a statutory and non-statutory consultation on the proposal to revise and introduce new charges. A KDM was published with the accompanying Regulation 10 notice on the 3rd of November, which again identified the need for an acceleration. The Chair of Scrutiny was contacted and the need for acceleration communicated. And as Councillor Smage highlighted some of the points from the Cabinet report, an immediate revision of the Council car parking fees and tariffs is required in light of the Council's financial position, so the acceleration of amended charges is required to support the MTFs. The Cabinet report resolution was, as highlighted previously, that approval be given to introduce new parking charges, that a statutory consultation process in relation to new charges will be undertaken in order to do this. Secondly, that the approval also be given to increase existing parking charges by inflation retrospectively, and that in addition, a non-statutory engagement and consultation process in relation to these increased charges will be undertaken. 3. Note that in accordance with the usual procedures, on completion of the consultation, a report will be submitted to Cabinet Committee Local Issues for consideration in relation to the traffic regulation order. And 4, that the local authority be delegated to the CCLI for the decision prior to implementation of revised charges. And number 5, that it be noted that any future annual revisions of car parking tariffs charges may be delegated to the relevant service director responsible for parking services in accordance with the financial procedure rules. The report did not provide in-depth detail of the options and financials, as the outcome of the consultation would be required to facilitate this. For example, the number of car parks where charges would be applied has yet to be confirmed. Prior to the Cabinet meeting, a notice of concern was raised, which included a lack of financial details. At the Cabinet meeting, the notice of concern was addressed, which resulted in an amendment to the resolution specifically. That authority be delegated to the CCLI for the decision prior to implementation of revised charges. This amendment means that a detailed report, including feedback from the statutory consultation and detailed financial plans, will be presented before implementation of revised charges. The panel should be aware that a current parking machine replacement programme will begin in January 2024 to replace up to 140 of now end-of-life parking machines. This project is business as usual, with an agreed capital budget of £900,000. The opportunity will be taken, however, to maximise this investment to support any new infrastructure required on parking areas that are approved for the introduction of new charges. In respect to the impact of revised charges, it will be monitored. This will include parking capacity for retail, car parking counts and network impact. Post-implementation remains the preference over any modelling, as the complexities are too varied. Indeed, a number of case studies reports by sector leaders have found it is difficult to provide conclusive results as to the impact of parking charges on behaviour. It is, however, clear that the tariffs do enable demand management and provide a balance between commuter and retail capacity and the indirect ability to promote model shift and resulting benefits. So finally, I do appreciate that increasing charging and introducing new charges is not popular, but we have held charges down for as long as possible. Chair, if I have permission, I'll cover some of the points that have not been covered in my opening statement, if that's okay with you. Okay, thank you. I think in terms of what Councillor Thompson raised in the presentation that was, well, the report, and certainly the questions that I answered at Cabinet, the British Parking Association actually did say, and I'm going to read this out for clarity, trying to find a conclusive link between town centre performance and car parking provision extremely difficult as the variables are many. It is noted, however, that the relationship between commuter and retail parking is established to ensure that the quality, proximity and capacity exists and that is beneficial to each group. Commuter parking should be priced to release capacity for retail shoppers and encourage a modal shift for commuters. In doing so, reduce town centre traffic, improve air quality, improve road safety and support local, regional and national sustainability strategies. So that's a counter report. I know that you quoted RAC, which is the RAC, not the RAC, the RAC, which is a private firm, but the British Parking Association is, I believe, one of the best practice evidence base that we are providing to you in terms of the counter narrative that you have actually provided. I'll move swiftly on to some of the other points that you made. Just bear with us. You've also mentioned something around the evidence that you found from Leeds University. You didn't actually quote what year that article was from, so that actually might be research that is out of date. And as you know, in the research of academic and field of research, they tend to keep on top of research. And so it'd be interesting to know what year you're quoting that from, because I'm pretty sure if it's anything above 3 to 5 years, it will be out of date. So you can't evidence the impact on business and retail. And like I said, and reassurance will be provided, we will monitor the impact, but not the impact on retail. We have obviously to monitor the capacity and network impact as well, so that will be considered. And I think I've covered everything. If there is anything left over, we will cover it at the end. In terms of, am I okay to carry on answering the rest of the questions? In terms of what Councillor... is that all right? Okay. In terms of what Councillor Adam Gregg had said, so the net positive within the first year, so it's 2.6 million estimated income. There's a 100,000k investment to the TRO signage, and there's a 900k capital, which is the business as usual, which is not included. So that covers off, I believe, Adam's question around finances. And Councillor Munro, in terms of that, obviously with residents and parking, it's obviously not the council's responsibility to find parking spaces for residents, but that is something we could pick up with you. But I do recognise, like, obviously with residents looking to park, it's ultimately their responsibility to find a parking space for themselves. Utilising car park, as highlighted in my opening statement, does and can impact on economic footfall. And Councillor Smage, I believe that the report that you are referring to, it was potentially not the correct report. You were talking about the first 11A. The process has changed mid-year, and now there is an integrated approach with not a level 1 or 2. So one is drafted for the Cabinet report, and I'll let the officers come in on that if they want to expand on that further.
Yep, I can come in on that. So when the original draft of the IIA was undertaken, which I think Councillor Munro was referencing online, that was in one type of IIA process that we had, which had a multiple stage approach. When the Cabinet report was actually agreed, the IIA process changed to a fully integrated one. So if you search the website, you'll find a fully integrated impact assessment directly linked to the Cabinet report.
Chair, I think I believe I've covered everything. If I haven't, I'm more than happy to to note those questions down again and come back to the panel members or observers.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. I will open this up now to questions from the panel. The first question that I've actually got, can you just confirm that not every car park in Kirklees will end up being ticketed, if say, and how are you going to actually assess whether it would be financially viable for a car park to actually have a ticket machine?
I'll let Graham come in on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lawson. As we already said, we do have an investment strategy around our parking machines, and one of the reasons that our income has fallen more recently on our parking is that the machines are coming to an end of life. So it's immensely important that we do replace those as soon as we possibly can. When we've made the decision, subject to the consultation regarding which new car parks will be charged upon, then I'm hopeful that we will look at that investment, the 900,000, as in the opening statement, to use that money in order to provide machines on those new parking areas. We also need to consider the use of app-based opportunities for income. That's not unusual within our borough at the moment, because both in Huddersfield, Dewsbury and in Home Firth, app-based payment methods are already there and becoming more popular. And we do know that there is national discussion and debate about the impact of app-based approaches already, app-based methods of payment alone, because some people might want to still use cash, card or otherwise. We are considering that, Councillor Lawson, in the next stage of this discussion, and as we move through to the final report, which will go to CCLI, it will include more financial details and the assessments that you're asking the question today as to which car parks will be viable or which car parks will not be.
Thank you, Graham. Have any of the panel got any questions that they would like to raise? Gary?
Thank you, Chair. The question I have is that there's obviously a lot of uncertainty about the real impact of this. As you've said, the models that exist out there are fairly unclear or not very good judge out there, which I can understand it's complex. But how would you intend to assess whether a car park would suffer from low vacancy rates due to higher charges without actually applying charges? Would that be based upon people saying, I won't park there, or how would you go about assessing that? Because that's clearly a reduction in vacancy rates reduces the economic argument to do this, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. Studies are incredibly interesting. People spend a lot of money. I'll be honest with you. In my career, I'm not referring to Kirklees, I might add, but in previous employment, I've seen people spend a lot of money on modelling of a variety of different things, hundreds of thousands of pounds in cases. We know the complexities. We've already heard from Councillor saying the British Parking Association and others, and I agree with Councillor Thompson, there are a variety of different studies out there which never get to a position where it's conclusive. The post-impact assessment has to be the way forward. The commitment from this council is that when we do look to introduce parking charges and increase parking charges, we will make sure that we do counts on the car parks in order to see whether those car parks have still the capacity for people to park that want retail. And of course we know that retail, the sweet spot for retail is around 2 hours. Yeah. We know that if we have cheap car parking tariffs for commuters, that takes away the opportunity for those that want to spend their money in our retail centres because it clogs the car parks up. And that's the balance that you need to approach this with and say, we want to make sure the 2 hour sweet spot is there and that we've got capacity for those people that want to come along and spend money in our economic centres. But we at the same time want to make sure that commuters, if they want to do, can come along and park. It's that balance that we've got to try to understand. And I think that's a statement that was read out by Councillor saying previously. So post-monitoring is the only way that we can look at this. That's the Council's commitment.
Gary, did you want to come back?
Will do. Thank you for that. So by that implication, are you saying that if a charge was applied to a certain car park and it turned out to have some negative consequences, there would be the ability to fairly rapidly reverse that decision and do something else?
Yeah, behaviours and the way that people will choose to respond to these increasing charges needs time to bed in. So if within a week people said there's a problem with that car park, that's not long enough. We're promoting that we would want at least a 12-month review in order to say what the impact has been whilst people's behaviours change, move around, or indeed that people make a choice to travel differently. And again, picking up on the point that Councillor Hussain was making earlier, indirectly, using parking tariffs can promote and can help and support modal shift, where people can choose to use a different way of travelling. It can indirectly help and support some of our air quality related issues. It can indirectly help some of our climate, carbon and sustainability strategies as well. And there are a number of policies out there regionally that look at car usage with some very ambitious stretch targets to reduce where possible. And that has to be something that this borough and this council has to consider. It cannot do that. So demand management can only be achieved if there's a parking strategy in place from a tariff point of view. Free parking basically allows people to park and potentially takes away the opportunity for those that want to spend time in retail areas, stops them getting the capacity they may need.
Thank you, Graham. Does anybody else on the panel want to ask any questions?
Yeah, in your 900k that you've got for your replacement programme for your meters, given that we don't know how many car parks free car parks are going to go into charging, do we know that we've got enough in that budget to pay for these meters? And just another question while I'm on. If we're going to app-based payment, the app's obviously going to take something out of it. Is the parking going to be more expensive to the car park user, or is the council going to absorb that cost?
Okay, thanks for the questions. £900,000 seems a significant amount of money. It is an amount of money that we've made the request for via the council. I would like to bring that cost down. We have currently about 140 machines across the borough that are, as I've said before, end of life. They need to be replaced. We have a good procurement process in place, and we've made the commission now. We will start to refit the machines in January, February. That will give us then the time in order to look at which car parks we need to install new machines on. I am hopeful that that amount of money will give us the capacity that we need, Councillor Bamford, in order to put the machines on the car parks. We also need to look at, does every car park need a machine? And that's why we look at the app-based approach. So providing we've got car parks that are relatively close together, there may be one car park with a machine on, the other car park may be an app-based. It's looking at that impact element, and that's what we would consider as we move forward. The second question around app-based, well, we don't subsidise, it's an app-based approach. It does cost a small amount more for people to take an opportunity to use that facility. You can actually cost more because you can put notifications on and more. So you need to be very clear as to how you use that app because it can increase. But we would not be subsidising that app.
Going forward towards the consultation, is the consultation, I know if you've got a town centre, we know we've got public transport in and out of there, and a modal shift is easier. In the rural areas, where it is largely car-based, you know, if someone's going from an elderly person going from one end of the village to the other to go to the co-op, we've got a limited retail offering. I'm just wondering if the consultation is going to be tailored between the rural and the urban areas, so that we know what people's feelings are on that, because you know, we've only got a couple of little car parks. They're not going to make a fortune, It's just around, you know, understanding what the local needs are.
Yeah, there's two elements to this, aren't there, of course. We've currently got Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Holmfirth, where charges are already in place. The consultation, there's no statutory consultation, but we will be doing a non-statutory to look to inflate based on our retrospective inflation. The statutory consultation on the local car parks, the more rural car parks, we want to engage with people in that particular area. The parish and town councils is a good example of that. Our staff know the district, the local residents know the district, and we will grab that information. Councillor Bamford will make sure that we consider. We did hear, and if I recall, at the council, at the cabinet meeting around this particular report, and I can't recall who said, made the statement, but I can recall a discussion about people come to our village, park their cars in the free car parks, and then travel into Huddersfield to do retail. Well, that seems a little bit counterproductive when we want those businesses within that local area to benefit from those people that are coming in there for retail. And that's back to my original point that I probably didn't make too clearly, is that we need to give that retail offer and that capacity for people. Free car parks potentially will be clogged by those people that want to clog them up. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will bring £1 to our retail providers. It doesn't mean that they will bring anything in. An example of that today, you know, I may come into a car park, it might be free, I might sit at my desk and eat a sandwich all day, yeah, but I've clogged and taken a space of someone that might want to have that retail. So I'm really, really keen to make sure we've got capacity for retail for that 2-hour sweet spot, both within the town centres, but also in the local communities that you've got out there.
Just to add to what Graham was saying, because our car parks have been free for so long, their usage has morphed into many different things. And so part of the consultation, we want to understand what that is, what that means. I know Councillor Malone mentioned residential parking, where we suspect some of our car parks may be 100% residential. So as we get the feedback from that, we may consider what that usage is. It may not be a car park. It could be resident permit parking, for example. Some of them are associated, you know, they're not really bringing any benefit to the economy, but they may be next to an existing business or other facility that actually it makes sense. Is it an asset we want to maintain? Will we get any money from it? Or is it something we might want to sell as well to make a capital receipt? So we have an assumption that we've worked through, but we don't want to move forward on that assumption, which is why we want the consultation, to really get that local feedback on, do we think this is what, we've assumed something, is it right, is it not right, and what would that model look like? There's a core of sort of our car parking business, which is Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Murfield. There's a number of large car park facilities where, from our view, they make sense to be large charge car parks. But then there's dozens of these smaller sites which we really need this detail to move forward on. To be able to look at that financial modelling in much, much more detail, which is the intention when we come back to Cabinet Committee local issues.
Thank you. You've actually answered some of the questions that I had around the smaller car parks and the financial viability of them and the fact that they are going to be looked at there. Matthew, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving us the advanced information that we asked for in our kind of pre-meeting a few days ago and the briefing notes that had been shown to Councillor Hussain in September. The first question I have is the closest thing to a consistent reason given in the Cabinet report is actually bringing us in line with neighbouring local authorities in the rest of West Yorkshire. But the price comparisons aren't in the report, but they are in those briefing notes, so thank you for those. But what isn't clear in either the report or the briefing notes is whether those local authorities in West Yorkshire have already done what we're proposing to do, which is get rid of a lot of what are currently free car parks. So is that information available, and was it known before the decision was made?
Yeah, thank you. In the opening statement, Councillor Hussain mentioned that the amount of free parking that we've got across the borough is unprecedented. I believe 57 car parks is the actual number. Many authorities, and certainly the ones that I'm familiar with, do not offer that level of capacity. And indeed, there are in the press today a move by other councils within West Yorkshire to introduce charges on car parks that have also been currently free. So it's a direction of travel that Kirklees are looking at, as other local authorities are, and similarly within some of the benchmarking that you'll see there are one or two local authorities that have subsequently looked to increase their charges above those identified in the briefing paper in September. So it continues to be a strategy. You know, lots of local authorities tend not to increase parking charges annually. They tend to be very antiquated, and again we've seen that in ours. 2009 is a long time ago.
Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Just to reassure you, when we did this, there was some benchmarking that did take place with other local authorities, and I was in sight of that.
Thank you very much. My next question was about the list in Appendix 2. Again, referring back to the briefing notes that we were shown, the list in Appendix 2 seems to be a comprehensive list of all the free car parks in Kirklees, which, from what you've said, presumably all of those are subject to the consultation. But in the briefing notes, there were only 21 which were the larger car parks. And the implication in those briefing notes is that the financial projections of income in the table are based on just those 21. So is that the case, or were those financial projections based on all 50, whatever it is, 55, 57? And when was that known?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The forecasted projection, income projection of £2.6 million is net of the £100,000 for our investment for the signing and the lining and more, and the TRO. But it does just reflect on the 21, and that's why we wanted to widen out the discussion of the Cabinet to look at the other areas across the borough. So it is just the 21 that's included in there.
And just to clarify, that was known by the Cabinet member well in advance of the decision?
Yes, Matthew.
Thank you, Yusra. My final question was, how was the decision reached to kind of skip the opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny, where a lot of these issues could have been addressed, and the council has made a commitment, the leader has made a commitment to more pre-decision scrutiny, where we as members of and representatives of the local communities could provide some of the detail that Will has said we're looking for in the consultation. So how and why was that decision made?
Yeah, again, in the opening statement by Councillor saying, when we looked at our mid-year performance to look to close the financial gap, we clearly identified more work to be done. On that basis, the Council needed to make a decision to accelerate. We did that by communicating that. We did a KDN published on the 3rd of November, a Regulation 10, which was then again communicated to the Chair of Scrutiny, and a discussion was held as to whether or not we could have got to a pre-scrutiny within the timescales that were allowed and left. We also know that parking is already identified for a scrutiny in the new year. So on that basis, we progressed because of the timeliness in order to meet the financial challenges that we face across the council.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If I may just ask, you were talking about when people change their parking behaviours and it bedding down for around about, so you'd look at it again about 12 months' time. There are going to be people that will not pay to park, will end up in residential areas. Have you factored in sort of potential sort of net revenue of how much it would cost for residents-only parking areas to be converted into residence areas parking? Also, if we do have more car parks, are we actually going to have more traffic attendants?
Okay, thanks for that question, Councillor Lawson. Yeah, behaviours are going to be difficult, aren't they, to understand what people do. What we will find is that the tariffs are, whilst are more than what people have been used to paying, because free is free, people will need to make that decision as to where they want to park. I have not, and we have not factored in where residential parking zones would need to be brought into place or otherwise. That would go back to the comment I was saying earlier on, whereby we would look at the impact, and we would look at the cost base. You know, I wouldn't be wanting to be bringing a residential parking permit scheme of £100,000 if the income from that small car park was a lot less. So that's the type of review that we would be doing in order not to waste any of this council's resources or finances to put more restrictions in place. Of course, the council has a responsibility to enforce its current parking orders, its traffic regulation orders. We took on CPE powers some years ago. We have reviewed the amount of resource that we've currently got, as in the number of CEOs, the civil enforcement officers. We are confident at this stage that, subject to the final numbers of car parks where we will bring new charging in, that we have enough resource in order to get those resources around to do the necessary enforcement. So at this time, I'm not looking to bring any more CEOs in, but that is always a potential. It goes back to the 12-month review. But at the minute, just to clarify, we're looking to increase the existing tariffs, and we are looking to consult on new charges for car parks across the borough. We are bringing in our new parking provider to bring the new machines on from January and February. That's business as usual. We're going to keep with the existing resources, and we're going to carry out a 12-month review. That's where we are at this particular stage in very simple terms.
Thank you. Will, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing that I think may have missed people, but I think it's an important point, that within this we are only talking about off-street parking. So existing free on-street parking, which tends to be a high churn, I'm nipping into the co-op to get my milk and bread, we're not proposing to introduce charges for. So that's trying to keep that quick business turnover that's, you know, half an hour in and out. We are only talking about the off-street. And as Graham said, we've looked at the routes and rounds, and we may introduce some more mobile routes, but in broad terms, the number of people we're looking to remain the same.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Hannah?
Yeah, it's only a really quick clarification about that 12-month review. I think what I think I've picked up is that I think originally when you talked about it, you said about doing the counts on the car parks, but that review will also include a wider impact assessment. So will you be looking for feedback from local communities, things like people reporting issues with parking on residential streets and things like that?
I think the simple answer is yes.
Are there any further questions the panel wish to ask? Okay, I will close this part of the meeting and we will go and deliberate in private. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody back and thank you for your patience while the panel has actually deliberated on our ease on everything that was put to us. We've actually is the actual decision that we've actually made. I will actually read out. The panel considered the 3 decision options set out in the Council's constitution that were available to it. 1, to take no further action, and 3, the decision for implementation. 2, to refer it back to Cabinet with recommendations for amendment. 3, to refer it back to the next council if the panel considered that this decision was not made in accordance with the budget or policy framework. What we actually resolved was the decision taken in relation to car parking charges be freed for implementation. We also have added 3 points of learning points that we feel that should be taken on board. So in respect of the decision, the panel wishes to make the following comments as learning points. 1, that within all future Cabinet reports, the reasons for the decision, the financial implications and options considered should be included. 2, the panel were satisfied with the level of financial detail provided at today's meeting and request that this be included in the future reports to the meeting of the Cabinet Committee for Local Issues. 3, the panel acknowledged the value and importance of pre-decision scrutiny process, which may have mitigated the need for a call-in, whilst acknowledging the urgency of the decision. Every effort should be made in future to factor in pre-decision scrutiny. And thank you. And on that note, I'll close the meeting.
Thank you.